Good evening. It's Wednesday, September 23rd. I laugh because I just never know what day it is. What's wrong with me? Why can't I even get that together? Wednesday, September 23rd, it's Wednesday night Bible study. We're in the book of Matthew. Um, let's see. That's not what I want. Jesus has he left the temple after cutting up in the temple, turning over tables, and because he was mad because the temple was supposed to be for prayer and for worship and for a sacrifice, and they had turned it into a flea market, and Jesus is mad anytime he comes into the church and we've lost our focus on what it's supposed to be about. There's nothing else supposed to go on in the temple but worship and praise and sacrifice, and so God's ready to turn over a bunch of tables when we're not, when we're just, all that stuff can happen someplace else, but he wants a sacred place dedicated just to him. So Jesus turns over the table, and the Pharisees are mad. They are mad, but they can't do anything because everybody thinks Jesus is a prophet, and so they can't just grab a prophet, you know. So I mean, they can, but they're about to be mad, and they'll grab them. So they approach Jesus, and what authority who told you you could do this? And so Jesus turns the table and starts asking them questions, and he starts telling them parables. Um, and so he does this about the vine dresser. This is the one we were just talking about last week. We ended up with last week. Um, so the parable of the vine dresser, and um, about the man who he owned this big winery. He leaves people in charge of it. He goes on vacation. When he comes back, he asks for the wine, and they say, "No, you can't have it." And he's like, "But this is my winery. What are you doing?" And he says, "No." And so um, he asked Jesus, "So what would you do in that case if the people that you left in charge were not doing what they were supposed to be doing?" And they all said, "Well, we would get rid of them, of course, and you bring in new people." He says, "Yes, and that's exactly what God's about to do with you. He's about to get rid of you and bring in new people." And so they're mad. They're mad. Uh, but they think, we got to get this guy. We got to figure out some way to get him. So in Matthew chapter 22, that's where we are, Matthew chapter 22, verse 15, it says, "Then the Pharisees went and plotted how they might entangle him in his talk." Because they got to trip him up somehow. They got to get him in trouble. They have no authority. They have no death penalty. The Jews don't. The Romans, they can put somebody to death, and they really want Jesus put to death. They need him gone because as long as he's alive and talking, then everybody's going to listen to him and not to them. So they need him dead. So they've got to figure out some way to get him in trouble with the Romans, because the Romans can sentence people to death. They can't. Okay. So Matthew chapter 22, verse 15 says, "Then the Pharisees went and plotted how they might entangle him in his talk." Now, Matthew puts it nicely, which is so interesting. He was there. Uh, Luke, who was not there, but he got his information from people who were there. Luke actually got a lot of his information from former Pharisees and how they were perceiving Jesus and what was going on with them. When Luke put the gospel together, Luke interviewed a whole bunch of people, but he's Greek and he talked to some Gentile. He just talked to different people. So here's how Luke describes what happened in Luke chapter 20, verses 19 and 20. It says, "And the chief priests and the scribes that very hour sought to lay hands on him." So the chief priests and the scribes. So the scribes are there, and we're going to get to the four different groups that were attacking Jesus in just a second. So they sought to lay hands on him, but they feared the people, for they knew he had spoken this parable against them. Like they went, "Duh, he's talking about us when he's talking about the vine dressers." Well, because he said to them, "Yes, this is you." So in verse 20 in Luke 20, it says, "So they watched him and sent spies who pretended to be righteous, that they might seize on his words in order to deliver him to the power and the authority of the governor." So Luke goes into more detail. And again, Luke's hearing what's happening from the Pharisees' point of view. So, yeah, we're going to send some people. They're going to pretend to be righteous. They'll fool Jesus, and they'll trick him into saying something, because he's gonna attack us Pharisees, but we'll just send somebody else. So there's four groups that were constantly attacking Jesus: the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Herodians, and the scribes. They each had a different function in Jewish society. Excuse me. And I'll try to illuminate what each group did and why they felt threatened by Jesus, etc. So Matthew chapter 22, we're back to Matthew 22, now in verse 16. So they sent to him their disciples with the Herodians. Now, that's the first group the Pharisees called over the Herodians. Now, the Herodians and the Pharisees hated each other more than the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The Pharisees and the Herodians were on opposite sides. The Herodians, so who were the Herodians? First of all, Herod is descended from Esau. So you got Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob's twin brother, Esau. Esau, when he split up with Jacob and kind of got mad at Jacob, right? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Yes, Jacob. When he got mad because Jacob had gotten his birthright, Esau went to live in Canaan, and his family stayed there, and they basically became the Edomites. When you hear about the Edomites in the Bible, they're living in Canaan for the 400 years that Jacob's family was living in Egypt. The Esau's family was taking up time in Canaan, kind of on the outskirts of Canaan. Various people came in and out of there, and they survived by making friends with other nations. That's how they survived. The Israelites are growing stronger in Egypt, even though they're being oppressed in Egypt. They're growing stronger, becoming this big nation. But Esau's family, they're only surviving if they make friends with these different groups that come through. And the Greeks had come through, so they made friends with them. And then the Romans came through, and they made friends with the Romans. Don't kill us, I'll be your friend. Okay, so the Israelites, they move back into Canaan, which is now Israel. We call it Israel. So they're in Canaan land, and the Edomites are still living on the outskirts. So they're distant cousins, but they're not Jewish. In fact, once they saw how things were going, that the Israel had taken over that whole land and had conquered the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hittites, and they went, ooh, maybe we'll pretend. And for the most part, the Edomites pretended. They converted to Judaism just so they could survive. Well, the Romans come in and they take Herod, who's an Edomite, descendant of Esau, not of Jacob, and put him in charge of the Jews, and just makes them king of the Jews. But he's not Jewish. So Herod's not Jewish, but he's related to them. And he had a little committee around him, a group of followers, a cabinet, and so called the Herodians. And they were responsible for maintaining ties between Rome and the Jews. I mean, that was their thing. And basically trying to convert the Jews to being Romans. Like, let's take the Roman money and the Roman customs, and let's, come on. And the Pharisees were like, no, we hate you. We're trying to stay Jewish. We're trying to stay, true to the Bible and to the Torah. So they were their natural enemy. But in this thing, they combined. Now, the Bible tells us when they first combined, because, sometimes you can hate somebody, but when you have a common enemy, then you'll come together against that person. So they found a common enemy in Jesus. He was a threat to both of them. One reason the Pharisees hated the Herodians and hated the idea of it all letting Rome come into Israel and dominate them was in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 15. Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 15. It says, you shall surely set a king over you whom the Lord God chooses. One from among your brethren you shall set as king over you. But you may not set a foreigner over you who is not your brother. So the king, God saying, yes, well, someday you can have a king who's part of you. And he's talking just to the Israelites, the children of Jacob. You can have a king who's your brother, but some foreigner you can't have. So when the Herodians were just set over them, there's like, oh, they can barely stand that, but at least are kind of vaguely related to them. But when the Herodians are trying to get them to, listen to the Romans and do what they say and use their money and all that. They're like, no. However, here's where they combined. In Mark chapter 6, this is the first time Jesus went into the temple at the very beginning of his ministry. He went like 6 months into his ministry. Jesus went to Jerusalem. He went to the temple, got in trouble, and didn't come back for 3.5 years. So the very first time he went, in Mark chapter 6, verse 3 and 4, it says they watched him closely, whether he would heal on the Sabbath. There was a man with a withered hand there, and so they're watching Jesus to see, are you going to heal this man or not? Why? Because it was the Sabbath, and they incorrectly believed you're not supposed to do anything on the Sabbath. So they watched him closely, whether he would heal him on the Sabbath, so they might accuse him. Verse 3, and he said to the man who had the withered hand, step forward. Verse 4, then he said to them, the Pharisees who were sitting who were watching what he's going to do, and there were some Herodians there. Okay, he said to them, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? But they kept silent. Now, they had in their mind, and we do this with the Bible all the time, that, well, the Bible says you can't do anything on the Sabbath. Well, no, that's not what it says. But that's their interpretation of it. And so surely we say, well, you're not, you got to stay home. If you do any kind of work at all, you'll get in trouble with God. Now, in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8, it does say, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Keep it holy, meaning keep it belonging to God. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it, you shan't do any of your work, but you can do God's work. He says the seventh day belongs to me. And so if God tells you to do something, if God has you, and they were to the point where they were just mad. Like, you mean I can't heal somebody? And that's what Jesus said. So I can't heal someone if God is leading me to pray for somebody. You think that's what it means by the Sabbath? That I'm literally just supposed to sit in a chair all day long? Again, the point was that they were to learn to enter into a rest and to hallow out, to make holy the Sabbath day as an act of faith. Because God told man, you would work 7 days a week and just work, because you're afraid if you don't work every single day, 24 hours a day, you're not going to have enough money. You're not going to be able to make it. So I need you to take a day off and just trust that I will provide your needs. Just trust. That's the point of the Sabbath day. I want you to trust. Don't do anything. Just relax. Take a day. It's just that by faith, it's a day that you're taking off saying, even if I don't work today, God is big enough to meet my needs. He's strong enough. He's most powerful. I don't have to work 24 hours a day. That's not God. My God will supply all my needs. So it's a day of faith. And he says, and give me a day where you're just trusting and doing my work instead of yours. Give me one day. Now, as Christians, we're supposed to enter into a Sabbath rest period where everything we do is inspired by God. Hebrews chapter 4, verses 9 through 10 says, there remains therefore a rest for the people of God. For he who has entered into his rest has himself also ceased from his works as God did from his. And here's what God is setting up. He's kind of setting up the Messiah. He's saying, you need to stop working. This is what the author of Hebrews is telling us. You need to stop working and thinking that your work's going to do it. We're now resting from trying to impress God. We're resting from trying to please God and trying to get God on our side and trying to get into heaven. Jesus did it. Jesus did it for us. So we rest from our work of trying to get God on our side. We trust that he is on our side, that Jesus did all that needs to be done. And that's the rest we enter into. And that's the rest that the author is talking about. So God is preparing them on the Sabbath day to give them an idea like, you're going to work for so long, and then you're going to stop working, and then I'm going to do the rest. That's what the seventh day really means. And so Jesus is like, you're missing the whole point of the Sabbath. The God's not just trying to put you in time out. He's trying to teach you that he's in charge, You don't have to work every single day, but mostly he's trying to teach you that your work stops at a certain point, and then his work begins, because he's trying to prepare you for for the uh, the Messiah coming. So Jesus asked them in the temple, "Am I? You mean I can't do good on the Sabbath? There's nothing I what?" And they didn't say anything because they hadn't thought about it that way. In Mark chapter 6, verse 5 says, "And when he had looked around at them with anger, being grieved by the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored as whole as the other." So the man whose hand was withered, he just said, "Stretch it out." And the man by faith had to do that. Sometimes God says, "Take a step, you know, go do that thing that you thought you couldn't do." And so the man could have said, "If I could stretch out my hand, don't you think I would have?" But he went ahead and was obedient, and he stretched out his hand, and then he became whole. And sometimes that's what God is asking us to do. First, I need you to stretch out your hand. I need you to take that step, and then you'll see how everything works. And then verse 6 of Mark 6 says, "Then the Pharisees went out and immediately Herodians against him, how they might destroy him." So Jesus' ministry is just starting. And the Pharisees, even though they hated the Herodians, said to them, "We got to come up with some way to stop this guy. Something. We got to do something to stop him." But then Jesus left, didn't come back. So it's been 3.5 years that they've been waiting to figure out some way to work with the Herodians to stop Jesus. So now they think they got it. So back to um, I'm I'm looking at the scripture that I put down. Okay, so um, they decided, okay, let's get the Herodians, and we're going to somehow trap Jesus, get him into trouble with the Roman government. So Matthew chapter 22, verse 16 and verse 17. So they says, "Teacher, we know that you are true, and you teach the way of God in truth. Nor do you care about anyone, for you do not regard the person of men." So thinking they can flatter Jesus, and he'll go, "Oh, you're so nice. You're so different than the Pharisees. I'll just do anything you want." So he says, "Tell us, therefore, since you always speak the truth, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" Now, this was a big deal because Caesar had printed up his coins, and he wanted to tax the people. Normally, interestingly enough, cities paid for their buildings and paid for their stuff by conquering other nations and stealing from them. And then they would build all, we took gold from this country and we built this and we built that. So taxes was kind of it wasn't a normal everyday thing, but Rome came to Jerusalem and came to Israel, says, "I think you guys need to pay taxes all the way to Rome." It's kind of like when the Americans were mad at, the British. "You need to pay us taxes." And like, "Why are we paying taxes to you to help build stuff in Rome? You're not doing anything here for us." So is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? Now, here's what they're hoping. They're hoping that he'll either say, "Yes, we should pay taxes to Caesar," and then the people will be mad. "Oh my God, you're showing allegiance to Caesar. We're not supposed to." Or they'll say, "No, we're not supposed to pay taxes to Caesar." And then the Romans will be mad, and they'll be able to take him and arrest him and try him. So they're just trying to trap Jesus. Um, and again, I just want you to know what a big deal this was. In Acts chapter 5, verse 37, when the disciples are preaching and the Pharisees are mad, and the disciples are preaching after Jesus has died, and they arrest them. And then one of them stands up, Gamaliel stands up and says, "I don't know if we should do this because, this might be God. But if it's not God, it'll fall away like all those other rebels." And he starts listing a number of rebels who kind of had come up since Jesus, since his time, since he had been crucified. And he mentions in Acts chapter 5, verse 37, "And after this man," he says, "Judas of Galilee," not the Judas that we know, different Judas, "he rose up in the days of the census." And that's what the tax was. Whenever they took a census, they would tax you. So once they went around and counted up everybody, okay, there's 10 of you, well, you owe $10. There's 5 of you, you owe $5. So he would send a census. Remember Mary and Joseph, they had come when Jesus was born. They were coming to pay the tax because of the census had gone out, and they were counting every time there was a census, They would tax people. So he says in Acts chapter 5, verse 37, remember Judas of Galilee rose up in the days of the census, and he drew away many people after him, meaning he was just, however, he also perished, and all who obeyed him were dispersed. So this guy, people were so angry in Jerusalem and in Israel about paying these taxes that it was easy for Judas of Galilee to stir everybody up, and they went and they were going to charge the Romans and attack them, but of course the Romans just put them down immediately, and so it wasn't hard to get people stirred up. If Jesus said the wrong thing, they were going to jump on it. Matthew chapter 22 verse 18 says, but Jesus perceived their wickedness, even though they're pretending to be righteous, and he perceives our wickedness even when we pretend to be righteous. And he said, why do you test me, you hypocrites? So he says, show me the tax money. So they brought him a denarius. Now here's what's kind of funny is they brought him they had this money, like they're carrying Caesar's money that they're saying, do you think we should do it? When they said, hey, show me, they go, oh, well, here's one. So they'd already kind of made up their minds. So Jesus was kind of embarrassing them without them even realizing it. You've already made your choice. I don't even know why you're asking me, because surprise, you got a denarius and I don't. So they brought him a denarius, and in Matthew chapter 22, verse 20, it says, and he said to them, well, whose image is on it? Whose is this? And they said, Caesar's. And we know this part of the story. And he said to them, render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And that's what we need to always do. If the government has built something and, and we're supposed to pay for them, that's fine. And the things that are God, if God is doing something, we're supposed to, help contribute to that. We're not to mingle them together. We have to always be clear what things are civil and what things are Christian. But lately we've been just mixing things. And Jesus is like, know for sure which things are Caesar's and which things are God's, and don't make them the same, because they are not the same. Verse 22. So when they heard these words, they marveled and left him and went their way like, oh, goodness, he's getting me. So this is Matthew's version. Luke says in chapter 23, verse 2, and they begin to accuse him. Oh, so listen, even though they like, oh man, later they accused him. When they arrested Jesus, they accused him and said, we found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ. He's a king, so they're lying. They're lying because Jesus never said, do not pay taxes. But once they wanted to, so they already had their minds made up what they were going to say that Jesus said. They already knew. And that's sometimes we have our minds made up when we come to God. We already have an answer we're expecting from him. Lord, I'm about to go on this fishing trip, and I ask you to bless it. And we're not asking, should I go? We're already saying, here's what I'm doing, God. So I need you to catch up and get with the program and bless me, because I'm already on my way. So I just need your traveling graces, because, I've already got this planned. And when we come to God with our plan and ask him to bless it, as opposed to saying, Lord, what's your plan? Then whatever happens, happens. But we can't get mad at God. Well, why didn't God bless it? Because God didn't send you. If he sends you, he's going to protect you. If you send yourself, then good luck. So the Herodians leave, and later they lied, about, he said don't pay. Okay, fine. So then the Sadducees come. Now there's four groups: Sadducees, the Herodians, and the scribes. The scribes are like the lawyers. They are concerned with what in the Bible is addressed as civic law. The Sadducees were actually the richer of the priests. They're priests. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, they're both priests, but the Sadducees came from a holier line of priests. They were descended right from Zadok, Z-A-D-O-K. When Zadok, he was the first high priest of the temple. He wasn't the first priest, but when Solomon built the temple, he appointed Zadok as the high priest. And so they can claim their lineage to him. And so they were felt we are the keepers of the temple, and they really were sticklers for the law. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. They didn't really believe in the prophets. Anything that came after Deuteronomy They didn't believe it. The Pharisees, on the other hand, they believed the law and the prophets. They was okay, but they had more faith in their tradition. And so the oral tradition that had been passed down, and again, that's where we are sometimes in the church. We have Pharisees in the church who can tell you, well, this is how we've always done it, and this is what this means, and that. It doesn't say that in the Bible. You always want to say, well, where does it say that in the Bible? And they're like, what? They don't, because this is how we've always done this. And so they can tell you how things should operate, but it's based on what their fathers did, what their forefathers did, etc., as opposed to, and it's religious. It has a religious air, but it's not Bible. So neither one of them are really dealing with the Bible actually says. The Sadducees were sticklers for the first 5 books of the Bible, and didn't just thought that the prophets were just crazy people who came and just said stuff. And the Pharisees thought, yeah, the prophets probably had some good things, but let's just do what we've always done because that's just safer. So when the Pharisees tried to get the Herodians to help, that didn't help. So now they're going with the Sadducees. They were closer to the Sadducees than they were the Herodians, but they didn't really love the Sadducees either that much. So Matthew chapter 22, verse 23 says, so that same day the Sadducees, who say there's no resurrection, came to him and asked him, saying, Teacher, Moses says that if a man dies having no children, his brother shall marry his wife and raise up offspring for his brother. Now, again, everybody's got to discredit Jesus because Jesus has shown up and said, you're wrong and you're wrong and you're wrong and what you're doing is wrong. And people don't like to be told that they're wrong. So the Pharisees had their shot, didn't work. Herodians had their shot, it didn't work. Now the Sadducees are going after him. So they're presenting him with this. And again, they love what it says in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The prophets came and gave us perspective on that. Here's what that means. Here's how you should live it out. But they don't care. And there are people like that who are real sticklers. No, but it says, and it's like, but here's what that means. I don't care what it means. I just care what it says. And you better do what it says. So, but you're misinterpreting it because, no, I'm not. So that was the Sadducees. So true enough, Moses did say that if a man dies, well, let's just read what he says in Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 5 and 6. He says, if brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, then the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. So normally her mother, the son would take care of her, right? And the family line's still going to continue because the son's going to get married, but he's going to take care of his mom, but there's still going to be children. But if there is no son, she didn't get a chance to have children. It says her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her, because they want that family line to continue. It was very important. God needed the Jews to continue to live. He still needs them to continue to live today. But I can't have these people wiped out. The Messiah is not going to show up if these people. So he's intent on keeping the family line going. Verse 6 of Deuteronomy chapter 25 says, and it shall be that the firstborn son, which she bears, will succeed to the name of his dead brother, and that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. So even though he was born through the uncle, he takes his father's name and continues that line. So Moses is just making provision to make sure that everybody, all these families keep going. There's a purpose for that. So they want to know, that, okay, you're supposed to take your brother if your brother's wife, if he dies. So here's the puzzle they're wanting to know. Matthew chapter 22, verse 25. Now, so let's say there were 7 brothers, and the first died after he had married and having no offspring, and he left his wife to his brother. Likewise, the second brother dies, and the third, all the way to the 7th. Like, they keep dying. First of all, you need to get out of that family.
She's a witch.
Something's wrong. Something's wrong.
That girl ain't right.
Yes. Why are all these husbands dying? But anyway, so let's say they all just died mysteriously. And so it says, verse 27, last of all, the woman finally dies. Mm-hmm. Now, and verse 28 says, therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife of the 7 will she be? For they all had her. She's married to all of them. So whose wife is she going to be? Now, they don't even believe in the resurrection. So this is a totally insincere question. But they just want to trip Jesus up and see what he says so they can make fun of him. And please, why your husbands keep dying? So verse 29, Jesus answered and said to them, you are mistaken. You don't know the scriptures. Because you don't understand. First of all, you don't believe. Now he's correcting the real question because they don't believe in the resurrection. So he says, first of all, you're mistaken because you don't know the scriptures that teach on the resurrection. Moses did not talk that much about the resurrection because God through Moses was trying to get them right now. I gotta teach you guys, thou shalt not kill and thou shalt not steal. Otherwise, you're all going to kill each other and you're not even going to survive. So, but once they had established the sacrificial system and the law and understood that killing was wrong, then prophets came after that and then began to talk more and more about God's plan. So, like in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. Daniel's prophesying about the end times. We might be close to the end times right now. And he's prophesying about the end times. He's seeing a vision. And it says, at that time, Michael shall stand up, the angel Michael, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble. He's talking about the tribulation. This is also talked about in the book of Revelation. Such as never was since there was a nation. So this is going to be so bad that since I created the nation of Israel, you've never seen a time like this. Even to that time, and at that time, your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. So he qualifies it. Yes, every one of my people whose name is written in the book. That means that they're trusting in me. Okay, talking about the book of life. Verse 2 says, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. Some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. So Daniel is talking about there's a resurrection. The Sadducees never read the book of Daniel, so they just don't. So that's why I don't believe in resurrection. It's not in Genesis, so it must not be true. But God is saying they're going to wake to everlasting life. Now, some to everlasting life with God, and some to everlasting contempt. And that's the problem. We are going to live forever, and so, but where? Where are you going to live? And in Isaiah chapter 26, verse 19 says, your dead shall live. Together with my dead body, they shall arise. Now Isaiah is speaking the Messiah's words, saying, I'm going to arise and you're going to arise. We're going to awake and sing, you who dwell in dust, for your dew is like the dew of herbs. So dew shows up in the morning and then disappears. So that sleep that's coming on you like dew, it's going to disappear, like dew that's on vegetables. That sleep that's coming on you when you're in the dust, it's going to be gone. It says, and the earth shall cast out the dead. The earth's literally just going to kick the dead out and say, get out of here. So he's saying to you guys don't know the scriptures, because you don't believe in the prophets. You only believe in the first 5 books of the Bible. So if you did, you'd believe in the resurrection. Secondly, he says you don't believe in the power of God. In Philippians, because there's something about the resurrection. It's not just that the dead are going to rise up, because I saw Night of the Living Dead. Don't want that. So it's not just that people are going to start busting out of coffins and walking around looking crazy. Verse 20 of Philippians chapter 3 says, for our citizenship is in heaven right now. If you're a believer, your citizenship is already in heaven. Your name's already been written in the book of life, from which we also eagerly wait for the Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, who will transform our lowly bodies, that it may be conformed to his glorious body, according to the working by which he is able even to subdue all things to himself. So he says, this body that we have, this mortal, will be swallowed up with immortality. We're going to have a glorious body. Like Jesus. It's a whole different, a transformation is going to take place. Thank God. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Verse 51, we've all know these, heard these scriptures. He says, behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at that last trumpet sound. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall all be changed. So our bodies are dying. From the time we're born, we start to die. And so we're clothed in mortality, which means bodies that are doomed to death. And so we're just slowly breaking down. Sorry, but we're going to have an incorruptible body, a body that will not die, a glorious body, a whole new body, and a whole new perspective on what everlasting life means. In 1 Thessalonians 4, chapter 16, verse 16 and 17 says, for the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And thus we shall always be with the Lord. So again, this is a vision of that last time when Jesus comes back again. There'll be a shout and the sound of a trumpet. First, the people who've died in the Lord, they're going to rise. And then we who are alive and are on the earth will meet them in the air. So for a lot of pre-tribulation people, a lot of people who wonder, will there be Christians on earth during the tribulation? Seems like there will be Christians on earth because he says we who are alive and are remaining on the earth, we're going to meet them in the air. And this is we shall always be with the Lord. So he's saying you don't know the scriptures that talk about resurrection, and you don't know the power of God that's going to change these bodies. And the change in our bodies is significant. That's the significant thing. In Matthew chapter 22, verse 30, he says, for in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like the angels of God in heaven. Now, he stuck angels in there, because they don't believe in angels either. They don't believe in the power of God. They don't believe in miracles. They don't believe in resurrection. They also don't believe in angels. In fact, Acts chapter 23, verse 8, Paul says, for Sadducees say that there's no resurrection, there's no angel or spirit. But the Pharisees confess both. They believe in that all. But the Sadducees don't think there's any sort of Holy Spirit. If you can't see it and touch it, it's not real. That's why they were such sticklers for maintaining the temple, because that's all they had. They didn't think there was life beyond this. So they're going to make this life glorious. And a lot of people live that way. This is all I've got. So I'm going to spend $100,000 on a new car, and I'm going to spend because you only live once, and that's not. See, unfortunately, that's not true. We're going to live forever somewhere. So you don't have to have it all in this life. We'll get it all in the next. But here's how Jesus answered them in Luke. This is because Matthew just didn't hear everything. Just letting you know, Luke had the people who talked to Luke, they just gave him more detail. So in Luke chapter 20, verse 34 through 36, it says, Jesus answered them and said to them, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. And the reason he's saying, in this particular way that God has constructed the world, marriage is necessary. People marry in this age. This is a thing. But when we have let me read what he says. Verse 35, but those who are counted worthy to attain that other age and the resurrection from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, nor can they die anymore, for they are equal to the angel and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. So you've got a situation in this age, this life we're living in, where God needs the species to continue, and you've got to have kids, and because we're going to die. And so somebody needs to be here to replace us so that the world keeps spinning. And he says, but in that age, we're not going to die. So we'll have a whole different perspective. We're not having kids because everybody who's ever been alive, who's trusted in God, will all be alive. The hundreds of millions of our billion, I don't know how many people that is, will all be alive and will never die. So we won't have bodies. This is the sad part for me, that has need to sustain itself. Like, I better eat something or I'm going to perish. You won't have that feeling because your body will live forever. So I haven't eaten in 3 days. I'm going to. No, you won't. You'll never have that feeling again. Your body's never going to hunger or thirst. And as far as sustaining the species and who we'll have a whole different perspective, and we'll have relationships based on totally different things, and we'll love those that the Bible says we'll know the people that we know now, and we'll love them and live with, um, but there's be certain things that are different because when you have an incorruptible body that won't die, you're just a different person. You have different needs. But as far as loving and knowing, and mama will be there, and daddy will be there, and this person, and knowing them, yes, we'll know even as we are known now, just like you knew people on earth and loved them here. Love won't change. Love won't change, but the need to have kids and to have barbecue, which really makes me sad, the need for it. Hopefully, we'll just eat it anyway, even if we don't need it. Okay, so Matthew chapter 22, verse 31. So, but concerning the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was spoken to you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob? He's saying God is not the God of the dead, because he didn't say I was. I was the God of I was. He's saying I am. Like they're currently alive. I am their God right now. So even if you only look at Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, because I know that's how you are, you Sadducees, that even then he said, I am the God of Abraham. I am. So Abraham and Isaac, they were all alive then. And so he says, God is not the God of the dead, but he's God of people who are alive. They are alive in him right now. So it says, verse 33, and when the multitudes heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. Like, oh my goodness. So they don't know what to say. So just quickly. So the scribes show up, right? Matthew chapter 22, verse 34. So, but when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, and this word silence means shut them up, that they gathered together, because they sent the Herodians to them, they sent the Sadducees to them, like, what are we going to do? Then one of them, a lawyer, this is a scribe. Yeah, all the other, Mark, Luke, John, describes him as a scribe. They asked him a question, testing him. Now, Mark, who got his information from Peter, describes it differently. It says, then one of the scribes came, and having heard them reasoning together, this is the Pharisees, and perceiving that he had answered them well, asked him, which is the first commandment of all? So in Mark's version, he's actually like, wow, this guy's really smart. I wonder but in Matthew's version, he was just testing him. So I don't know which one of them is right, though I tend to lean toward Mark. So Matthew 22, verse 36, he says, teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law. And Matthew 22, verse 37, Jesus said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And they've been arguing about this for years. If you read a lot of rabbinical writing, some people thought the law of circumcision was the most important law because it was the law that connected you to, for some reason men have to rank things. It's very important for men to know who's the best basketball player, what's the fastest car, who's the best, what's the tallest building. It's like a man thing. If you get a bunch of men together, they will have come up with 5 lists by the time they're all through talking, because what's the biggest dog? I don't know why. It's just a man. So they need to know what the greatest commandment is. So some people said it was the law of sacrifice was the greatest, if you read the rabbinical writings, because that's where we show how much we love God. Some people said the law of the Sabbath was the greatest, and the law of washings was great. They just had different reasons why they thought. But Jesus says, no. The greatest law is loving the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second one is like it. Love your neighbor, as yourself. And in these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. And Jesus is saying simply that if we love God, you don't have to worry about, there's 10 commandments. Well, no, actually, there's 630 commandments. How can I come in? If you just love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself, you'll fulfill everything in the law of the prophets. If you'll do the right thing if you put God first in everything and love him more than you love your car and more than you love your this and you love your that. Love him the most. And then love your neighbor, and you won't steal from your neighbor. You won't kill your neighbor. If we can learn to look at people and love them and see them. And of course, who is my neighbor? Jesus said, that Samaritan that you hate, that person that you think is your enemy, that's actually your neighbor. When I say love everybody, he says, I mean everybody. Those who spitefully use you, even though who slap you on one cheek, if we could just learn to love people and see them through God's eye, we will fulfill everything that God's for. So he's trying to teach these people, even though they're about to get judged. God loved the people. He's talking to the people who in 6 days are going to crucify him. And yet he's still taking, and he knows this, and yet he's still taking the time to teach them and try to help them and to reach them, even though they're going to turn on him. And we have to be that way. That's who God wants us to be, is people who love those, even when they're coming after us, we still see them through God's eyes, because God wants to reach everybody. He's just merciful. He wants to reach us. He's merciful to us. He doesn't wipe us out. And that's how he wants us to see that God pities everyone, that he loves everyone, and that he wants them to repent. He wants them to come to a knowledge of him. So I'm going to end there, because the worm is about to turn in Jesus's life. He's about to say, okay, let me tell you what's about to happen in the next couple of days. And this is going to shock the disciples. And it's going to shock you, because you're going to hear what Jesus meant in a different way than you normally have heard it. But I'm going to show you from the scriptures, this is really what Jesus was talking about when he was talking about the destruction of the temple and the coming of the Son of Man. It's not who you think it is. So we will continue. Thank you so much for listening in. And I'll see some of you next Wednesday, some of you this Sunday at 10 a.m. for my Sunday school class. God bless.